Welcome to Talking Kootenay Books. I'm Keith Powell. Today our guest is David Savage. Welcome, Dave. Great to have you here today. We're talking about your book, Breakthrough to Yes. So the subtitle of the book is Unlocking the Possible Within a Culture of Collaboration. So let's explore that idea of collaboration. Why do you think that's such an important aspect of life and business?
Today is different than any time in history, Keith. We have to collaborate. We have to work together because nobody has the solutions. The heroes that we try to elect, we try to put the head of our corporations or our not-for-profits, they can't do it by themselves. They have to collaborate. The reason I wrote Breakthrough to Yes is to create a culture of collaboration, to in fact give people the diverse perspectives, design the team, design the process properly. I've got 10 essential steps to collaboration. So number one point is today is more challenging, more complex, and more conflict than ever in history, I would venture to say. So my solution is build a culture. Collaboration is not an event. And more than that, I've created the 10 essential steps to help leaders actually work together better over time and evolve as a team, evolve as an organization.
Interesting. So Dave, I haven't had the opportunity of interviewing anyone that's written what I would call a business book, and I think yours is probably the closest to that. You do describe it as a business book, is that correct?
You bet.
But I also noticed that when I went through the book and read a number of chapters, there's sort of life experiences, things that you've written in there that would really apply across the board. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's an interesting situation, Keith. It's my first solo book, and I know as a speaker and as a trainer and as a business coach, stories motivate. So building storytelling into a business book is kind of across the genres. Therefore, I wanted to make it real. I wanted to make it about my experiences, and I guess the other feature of the book is a collaborative book. There's lots of books on collaboration now. Mm-hmm. Mine's the only book that's actually a collaborative book. I've got 100 people.
What do you mean by that?
I've got 100 people from 5 different countries quoted in my book, and I've done some research with a PhD from Nova Scotia on what their answers were. Mm-hmm. So I'm very proud to say it's a unique book. It's a story book. What some people have said, well, geez, Dave, you've failed a lot. And I have, and that's after 42 years of business. Mm-hmm. I want to share my learnings. I don't want people to continue to fail over and over and try to do it without learning from my experience and my 100 collaborators in 5 countries.
Interesting. So I'm just thinking a business book written here in the Kootenays. What's been the reaction to your book, and what kind of feedback are you getting?
It's interesting. It's everything. What I'm totally delighted about and surprised about is I get people like Marshall Goldsmith, who has given me a testimonial for my book. This is the way to work together better. Book's been out for about a year now, Keith, mm-hmm. and we've sold 15,000 copies in China. Wow. I had no idea. Wow. Now we're at Aaron's place at Lotus Books today in Cranbrook, and we might have sold 10 books. Mm-hmm. So it is an international flavor, and at the same time, there's so much more to do. Mm-hmm. If I might, I've done 41 podcasts. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be...
So the podcasts tie into the book?
Tie into the book. I've got another 47 guests there in my book.
So by trade, your business is consulting. So is that a philosophy that you bring into your consulting practice?
Yeah. So when I used to run little oil and gas companies in Calgary, and then when I moved out to the Kootenays 14 years ago, I realized I actually don't know very much. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm a grandfather, I've raised teenagers, and I've lived here for 14 years. What I want most for my book and my community in our world is actually to build skills. Mm-hmm. So my offerings, my coaching, my workshops are all about skill building over time to get people to have the courage and the success working together.
Dave, can we talk about the writing process? How long did it take you to put together the book? Would you tackle it again, or is this a one-time project? Give us your thoughts on that.
It is not a one-time. In high school, I won a Golden Quill Award because I wanted to be a writer and then a photographer. So finally, at the other end of my career, Keith, I'm a writer. About 12 years ago, I met a number of the people on the Harvard program of negotiation, Bill Urey, Erica Fox, Doug Stone, etc. And I claimed to them, I said, these are brilliant books on collaboration, dispute resolution, but you guys have all spent your entire career in the ivory tower. You actually don't know most about negotiation and conflict. So I'm going to write a book about that. And they encouraged me to do that. It took me 3.5 years of getting up at 5 o'clock every morning. You know this, Keith. You're writing for 2 hours, whether you put a word on the page or not, or whether you end up writing all day because you got so excited and inspired. So it's a labor of love. I'm writing another book. I'll be publishing another audio book and ebook this fall. So it's a continual offering and learning. And one of the things that's most important to me is to invite others in. Oftentimes people think that they're not the experts. Well, if they can be quoted in our books, in our audio books, in our ebooks, in our workshops, it helps. It brings them into leadership.
That sounds like collaboration to me.
Yeah, what a concept.
So as we wrap this up, Dave, what one piece of advice in your mind stands out in the book that you would share with readers?
Collaborative leadership is the way to success. If you want to continue to try to be the hero, you'll get cremated. It is the only way going forward. If I may add to that, the most recent projection for the skills that are needed most in 2020 is complex problem solving, collaboration, and critical thinking. I think all of those things allow us to break through to yes if we do it together.
And those are topics that you address in the book?
Those are all topics in the book and the podcasts and the audiobooks.
Good. Well, we look forward to your next publication as well, and congratulations on publishing a business book that has application just about to everyone. So appreciate you taking the time to be our guest today on Talking Kootenay Books.
Thanks, Keith.
This has been Talking Kootenay Books. I'm Keith Powell. Welcome to Talking Kootenay Books. My name is Keith Powell. I'm your host. My guest today is Brendan Gillen. Brendan is a Cranbrook-based author. Great to have you here today, Brendan.
Good. Thank you for asking me here. Yep.
You know, Brendan, I've known you for some time now, and you have to be one of the most prolific authors and writers that I know of that are based in this area. How many books have you written?
I've written 3 books of poetry, 3 autobiographical books, and another 9 books that are set in Northwest BC along around the town of Stewart, Hyder, Alaska, and around the maintenance depot at Bobcon Lake on the Cassiar Highway.
I see.
Yeah.
So you have a real interest in the Northwest. What spurred that interest?
I did go up there in 1973. In fact, I landed in Stewart on the 15th of October 1973, and I stayed up there almost a year. And I worked as a laborer and as a blaster and as a driller on the construction site at Bobcon Lake. Yep.
I see. So the area must have made an impression. Lots of good stories out of that area?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there was nothing up there when I was up there. The road was a logging road, basically a logging road. And if you wanted, like, for as far as communications is concerned, it was a two-way radio. Like, if you made a phone call, it was an open line. So if you talked to first of all, you had to get the operator, and then then the line was open, so anybody could listen in on your conversations, and everybody did as a means of entertainment up there. Yeah,
I see. So the old party line.
the old party line.
So Brendan, I understand you have a new book out. Can you just tell us what the title of that book is and maybe what it's about?
Yes, it's called Rustlers of the Cassiars.
Okay, what's the significance of that?
Well, it's about four guys. One of the guys, he's a wheeler dealer, and he sells two horses that don't belong to him to a guy in Prince George. And the guy pays the horse rustler up front, and then so now the guy has to steal the two horses from a mountain herd that's up that way. And so the story is about himself, that the rustler, drawn in three other people from the construction site, and they're all set out to steal two mountain ponies from this herd. Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like an interesting plot. You've put some intrigue in there. How is it that you come up with your ideas, concepts? What sort of inspires you to write the series of books that you have?
Well, I've always wanted to be a writer. And of course, I always wanted to be a writer. And I just thought that at the age I was in my late 50s, and I thought if I'm going to do it, I better do it, because I can't. There's been a dreamer and then there's been a schemer. So I wanted to be a schemer instead of a dreamer. So I decided that I was going to start writing, and of course I started keeping a journal when I was up on the Cassiar Highway, up at Powell Lake. So although I've never actually taken any information from it or any incidents from it, I have by keeping a journal, I've got my mind thinking in the writing process.
So that gives you a basis, that sort of a sense of inspiration there that allows you to draw on some of those personal experiences? Absolutely,
yeah. And 40 years ago, or 45 years ago, it was a different age.
Yes.
You had a big mine in Stewart, about 30 miles out of Stewart, called the Grand Duke Mine. You had about 500 or 600 miners. And then 2 miles from the town of Stewart, you had Hyder, Alaska, which is a ghost town, which is a ghost village. And that had a character on its own.
Sure.
And then all the way up from Hyder, right up through Alaska, where you come back out into British Columbia again, to the Grand Duke Mine, you had old mines up that way. There were old mines, and there were buildings along the road that had been there at the turn of the century, because it's actually a very rich mining area, know.
So the dynamics of your book sound interesting. How do you fit all those pieces together? You've got colorful characters, you've got events, things. How is it that you structure your books?
Well, I just go at it. I just sit down and write, and I let the ideas come to me. I get one idea, and then I play that idea off another idea, or I play one character off another character. It's just I don't know. Sometimes I ask myself how I do it myself, but it's all in the writing process.
Right. So if I followed you correctly, I think it adds up to well over a dozen books. How is it that you're able to produce that amount of volume? Is it just writing every day, or do you have a schedule? Or
I usually try 2 hours in the morning, and then I take a couple of hours off. Then I go back at it again for another 2 hours or an hour and a half, and then I take more time off, and then I go back again at usually around 4:30, and I work till 6:30, and I usually work 6 days a week. So yeah, I used to be a production. I'm a butcher by trade, so I'm used to working. I'm used to doing physical work. I'm used to turning out a product.
Right.
So I carry that same
sort of work ethic into writing?
I carry that work ethic into writing,
So I'm hoping you're not butchering your books.
Well, I do that too. No, that's my editor's job.
What's general reaction to your books?
Well, that's the great thing. People have been very, very positive, and that's really what encourages me to do the writing. I don't have a tremendous fellowship, but the people that have read my books have been very, very encouraging. And they're always asking me, "Oh, when is your next book coming out? When is your next?" you know, next book.
So they're very supportive and
they're very-
obviously enjoying what you're writing.
Yeah, 'cause I do have a nice writing style. I have interesting characters, great locales, and I've got a good sense of humor, you know.
Okay. So it sounds like a formula for a successful book. So let's just talk again about the new book. So what is the name again?
It's called Rustlers of the Cassiars.
Oh, I
yeah.
see. Okay, and what's the subheading there?
It's Canada's Connoisseur of Celtic Chaos.
Okay. So that's sort of in line with your other books. So.
Absolutely, yeah.
Good.
You know,
Well, congratulations, Brendan. I really appreciate the fact that you took the time to be our guest on Talking Kootenay Books today.
I'm grateful for being asked to be here. Yes,
Great.
thank you.
My name is Keith Powell. Thanks for watching. Welcome to Talking Kootenay Books. My name is Keith Powell. I'm the host of the show, and our premise today is really to talk to authors, writers throughout the Kootenays. What we want to do is delve into what's motivated them and inspired them to write their books, what the process was like when it comes to producing a book, and really what has motivated them to put their thoughts down on paper and actually publish a book. So our first guest today is Steen Jørgensen. Steen is well known in the community, and welcome, Steen. Great to have you on Talking Kootenay Books.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Great. So, you know, we use the expression hot off the press, and your book is literally hot off the press. I just got a copy of it last week. So congratulations on your new book. But before we get into your book, let's just talk about who Steen Jørgensen is. So can you just give me a little bit of a bio as to who you are?
Born in Denmark, immigrated to Canada when I was young. Grew up on the coast in Port Alberni. Went to art school. Wasn't very good at that, so went into the newspaper business and stayed there for 43 years and retired about 10 years ago.
Okay, good. So I knew you quite extensively through the newspaper business. You were actually a publisher at the Cranmer Daily Townsman, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, so let's talk about your book, Finding Hansen. So I found it to be a fascinating read. It really had a real sense of place. It contained a lot of information that was very captivating and sort of followed the life of this young man. So can you give us a premise of your new book?
Well, the book starts in 1963, and we follow the life of John Hansen, who's a 17-year-old who leaves home for various reasons. He's got a problem with his new stepfather and decides to go to sea, and unfortunately he gets a job on a freighter. So Christmas Eve 1963, he embarks on his journey, and we follow his journey through the decades as he matures and becomes an older person, and his likes and loves, and generally his life as he goes on.
Right. So we do get a sense of who John Hansen is, your main character in the book. A colorful character, lots of life experiences that he encounters and so forth along the way. Where did he originate from again?
John Hansen?
Yes.
The character himself, or
Yes.
from my mind?
Yeah, no, the character himself.
I'm not sure the question.
Okay. So if I remember right, reading your story, he originally came from Denmark. Is
I'm
that
sorry,
correct?
I understand, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And so then from there over to Canada, and then it was his life as it played out in Canada. So tell me the inspiration. What was the inspiration behind the story?
Well, the book is fiction.
Yes.
However, there are some autobiographical moments in there.
Okay.
Someone asked me the question, how much of the book is John Hansen, how much of the book is me? And I tell them it's a 40-60 split.
Right.
And they can figure out which is 40 and which is 60.
Right.
So some of his experiences have been my experiences, and of course some others are just strictly from my imagination.
Right. So let's just talk for a minute, Steen, about the writing process. I think you told me 4 years went into writing this book. It's a substantial work of 400 plus pages. So tell me about the process. How did you go about writing it?
I had written a book of short stories and decided that I wanted to take on a bigger project, and that was in 2011. And from that point on, writing, as you know, is a lonesome profession, and you can think about it and we can talk about it, but it's in the doing. So every day you go down and you sit in front of your processor or your computer and you spend hours at the screen either staring at it blankly or actually putting something on the screen. And in my case, the muse would visit me every so often and inspire me. So it took almost 2 years to actually finish the draft, the first draft.
So a lot of work went into it, a lot of effort and so forth. So let's talk about the story just for a moment again. So it led you from, I believe it was Port Alberni, is that correct?
Port Alberni.
And then to Nelson?
The character
Yes.
goes from Port Alberni. He spends a certain amount of time on the ship. He comes back to Port Alberni, he goes to Nelson, and from there there's all kinds of things happen. He ends up in Europe.
Right.
Towards the end of the book, and there's that journey that we're talking about.
Right. So you really do follow that journey of that character, and it gives a great insight into some of the Kootenay's history as well. So I found it really fascinating as you work that history, and also a little bit of a glimpse into the publishing business and the newspaper side as well. So I thought that came out very, very nicely in your book as well. So Steen, why do you think people are going to enjoy reading your book?
Hard question. I could ask you the same question. But let me give you a little background
Sure.
story. I had shelved the book for about 8 months, and I wasn't
Okay.
going to do anything with it. I had sort of lost, after the 5th draft, you sort of say, I don't want to see this book ever again.
Right.
And I had some manuscript readers which were very helpful. And I was at a board meeting. I belong to a local board, and there's a lady, a friend of mine, said, I heard you've written a book. And I said, well, I have a manuscript. And she said, I'd like to read this book.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, why not? Let her have it. So I gave her the manuscript, which is, as you know, it's difficult reading manuscripts because you've got 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper. And the following month, she came back, and she had tears in her eyes. And she said, the book affected me so much. She said, I laughed, I cried, I ached. She said, I loved it that much. And I thought to myself, if I can inspire one person to read the book like that, perhaps there's an audience out there for the book. So that would be my answer to your question.
Yeah, good. So making those connections with your readers is very important. So you know what, the thing that maybe stood out the most for me is the fact that you had a real sense of place. Whenever you were describing an area or a circumstance, a situation, I could sort of envision myself being in that circumstance. Your description was excellent. Steen, would you just share maybe an excerpt from the book for us?
If we have time,
Sure.
I'd be happy to do that. This is an excerpt where John has left the ship and he's back in Port Alberni and he's dealing with some domestic things with his family. And I'll just read a couple of paragraphs.
Sure.
That'd be all right?
That'd be great.
It was Saturday. This afternoon, he and Carl would take a ride out to the Johansons. But this morning, as he had every second week since leaving the Aftenstjerne, that's the name of the ship, John sat in a booth at the Beaufort Hotel coffee shop waiting for his mother Eva and his half-brother Norman. Conversation between him and his mother was always stilted, one-sided. It mostly centered on her life with Red, her husband, and Norman, the apple of her eye. Built in the 1950s, the hotel and cafe wore a slightly out-of-place feel in this late 60s environment, with booths along one side and a long counter with single pedestal stools bolted to the black and white tiled floor on the other. Each bright red vinyl booth with a chrome-edged plastic tabletop was equipped with a metal coat rack and its own 3 songs for only a quarter folks, shiny mini jukebox selection apparatus. At the far end of the cafe's back wall stood like a giant half-finished, flashing neon-lighted futuristic robot, the 50 record, All Hits Roca Ola, the granddaddy of all jukeboxes. Today someone had picked Little Green Apples by O.C. Smith, probably the least favorite of John's top 40 hit parade. From the booth, through the narrow horizontal pass-through, John could see only the heads of the white-capped cooks as they sped back and forth preparing orders in the steamy kitchen. As his mother and Norman entered through the glass door, John rose, went and gave her a kiss on the cheek and said, "Morning, Mum." He took her short woolen coat, silk scarf, and hung the coat on the metal post, tucking the scarf in one of the coat sleeves. To his sibling, John asked, "How are you, Norman?" "Fine," was the usual brief reply.
Right. So again, a real sense of place. You can imagine yourself in that setting, and I found that to be the case and throughout the book. So a job well done there. So Steen, let's just talk just for a moment as we wrap this up. You'll be having the book available for people throughout the Kootenays, is that correct?
We're starting today with Lotus. I actually just sold my first copy as we were sitting here. So, and then I'll be traveling to Nelson. I'll be traveling to Port Alberni later on in the spring.
Right. So I mentioned at the beginning, it's hot off the press. You probably haven't even got all your plans to market it together yet, but are you planning to have a launch or a special event?
I would like to. I haven't chosen a date for that, but yes, I would like to have a signing, and I'd like to join you and your group maybe in a few months when you have your next authors gathering.
Right. We do a Kootenay authors event every fall as well. Congratulations, Steen. Enjoyed your book, Finding Hansen. An enjoyable read. Thank you for being our guest on Talking Kootenay Books.
Thanks for having me.
So my name is Keith Powell. Thank you for joining us on Talking Kootenay Books.